warm welcome from our side. I'm Matej from University of Ljubljana, and today we have a very special guest. So, as you will know more about her during the full hour of the webinar, our special guest speaker, Ana Kyra Bekš, is the co-founder of Servis 8, Slovenia's first service design institute, and the partner at the International Co-Creation School project. Her expertise spans service design, UX design, co-creative facilitation, and consumer experience, with a special focus on the public sector. Her talk today will mostly focus on the value of consumer experience design during product development, with practical tips and actionable steps for companies to enhance their products and services. And now I give the word to my colleague Daria. She also had a short introduction, and then we will slowly start.
Thank you, Matej. My name is Daria Demšar. I come from Institute for Sustainable Development, for those who don't know me yet. So a warm welcome also to all colleagues from the Bioeco-UP project, and especially to the representatives of the companies and organizations who agreed to participate in our activity in the project. We have tested a total of 39 bio-based products and services, and from 7 Central European countries. We made 2 rounds of testing on a national level, and then also 7 products were chosen to be tested on transnational level, which means in some other country than where they are produced originally. On the other hand, I would like to introduce Ana. Ana, more than 10 years ago, you started with so-called service jams, where groups of different people faced a public problem and then they tried to solve it within 48 hours. I think the development of these focus groups that were solving these problems are a little bit similar to maybe to the process of co-creation workshops that we had in the Living Labs. And on the other hand, we focused also on product testing and valorization of user experience. And this is actually your professional area of work as well. And for the last 10 years, actually, you focused on the user experience. So I look forward to hearing from what you have to say about product testing from this user experience perspective, and how you can help organizations to focus on their users. However, the goal of today's short webinar is not so much to learn some new techniques, but rather to understand the whole landscape that organization may face when developing their product or service and testing it with the user. So to know what are all the areas that maybe we have not touched upon yet, and also to understand what are different layers that we can explore in these usability testings. So we designed this session to give enough time also to have a discussion at the end, also with the company representatives and with project partners, to really more reflect on our experience during Living Labs and from the perspective or from the experience that you will present to us. So thank you to everyone to take your time, and thank you, Ana, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for the lovely introductions, Matej and Daria. Yes, I will try to talk a little bit about what I know about this field, a little bit about my experience. As I'm going to share my screen and share the presentation, I will not see the chat. So I would kindly ask Matej and Daria to follow the chat and encourage everybody, if there are any questions or something you'd like to know more about, to write it in the chat. That way my presentation today is going to be much more relevant to you. I did something to cover a little bit of all the aspects of customer experience design, but with your questions, we can really make it relevant. So I will share my screen now. Let's see. Okay. Do you see my presentation? Yes?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So yeah, as it was mentioned, I'm a co-founder of Servis 8. Last year we had our 10th birthday. And Servis 8 was actually born out of organizing service design jams. This is a global event that happens every year all around the world, and it aims to bring service design to the world. Through that, I also met the initiators of this event, and with them we co-created the Co-Creation School, which is an international community of people who believe that we can do great stuff with people. And as I like to say, I'm a master of spreadsheets. I love data. I love organizing stuff. So this is something I'm really passionate about. From the logos on the right, you can see we've worked with many different types of organizations, public and private ones. I also worked with startups and smaller companies and bigger companies. Although in the past few years, we have focused our work and projects in the public sector. So in the recent years, mostly the organizations I work with are ministries and municipalities. So today, what I'll talk about is about customer experience design. How does it look like? How to do it right and what not to do, based from my experience. We're going to have some questions that you'll be invited to answer to. And I'm going to end by giving you 3 tips on what you can do next to improve the customer experience of your products. So if you look online or if you look at different expressions that are used, these are usually the words that you will see. You will see service design, CX, UX, customer experience design, design thinking, product design. And to give a little bit theory behind all of these expressions, because they might seem very similar, but it's useful to understand how they're different. And an example I'd like to give is think of a theater play and think that product design is the stage. So these are the objects that you design, that you want to show, that you want to portray. And then UX design is thinking about how will people interact with your product, right? So in the product design, you will mostly think about functionalities, maybe materials, the overall look. Whereas in UX design, you will think about how people interact with your product. If it's a digital product, a website or an app, that's maybe one way, but it can also be a physical product. I know mostly your products are physical products. Or even if it's a service, thinking about how do people interact with your service, with the product or with the service intact. Then if we zoom out, we come to customer experience design. So customer experience design does not only look at the interaction of a user and your product or your service, but about the whole experience of that person. So think about, I know that one of your products, I think they're crayons for drawing. So you will not only think about how people draw with your crayons, but also where did they find out about them? What do they know about it? What information they needed before they bought it? When was the first time they even thought about needing crayons, right? So what are the needs? So it's a much larger scope. And then if we even zoom out, if we look even further, then we come to service design. Service design does not only look at the front stage, where you can see here in the image, right, this part facing your customer, but it also looks at the processes and things that that happen in the backstage. So things that your customers don't see. So in product development, that would be how is your product being designed? how do you source your materials? How does logistics looks like? So all the backstage of the support processes that ensure a really great customer experience. So just to understand what are the different lenses and what you can look at. And what I want to talk to today a little bit about is that maybe you want to start thinking about your product as a service. So there's this quote by Theodore Levitt that people don't want a quarter-inch drill, they want a quarter-inch hole. So it's thinking about that. It's not thinking about your product is not that people want to buy your product per se, but they want to achieve something with it. They want one of their problems to be solved or whether one of their needs to be met. So if you think about and you look at your products, you have to understand that your customers will always co-create the experience with your product, because based on their past experience or their knowledge or even their physical abilities, their experience will differ. And I'm sure you found out that during testing how different people differently interact with your products. And also what I want to emphasize is that maybe it's going to break your heart a little bit, but when we think about product design and customer experience design, it's not so much about your product, but more about what people expect, what are their preferences, and what are their habits related to the product that you're offering to them. But what I want to emphasize also is it doesn't really matter how you call it, it matters what you do. If I would have to sum it up, I would say that these are like the three main guidelines that it's going to really help you improve the customer experience of your product or your service in general. The first one is to ask, listen, and learn. This is really important because when we design something for a long time, that we've invested our energy into it and time into it, we become very biased. And it's really important to ask other people and to really listen and to really learn from them. I'm going to talk more about that later when I'm going to focus a little bit more on customer research. The second one is try, learn, and then try again. So this comes a little bit from agile development, also from design thinking. It's about experimenting and trying and learning through doing in the real world. That's how you develop products. So it's not about you locking yourself in a room and planning all out and then launching your product on the market, but really experimenting and learning as you go. And I think this project that you were part of, the Living Lab, really emphasizes that as well, right? Because you had multiple testings, multiple ways of trying and learning and exploring. And then the third one is planning for iteration and adapting. So I think it's also, you probably already noticed, is that designing a product and getting it to the market is not a linear process. Maybe some of you are familiar with the waterfall process, where you have one phase and then you complete it and you go to the next phase. Now we know that going in loops and reiterating, so let's say in a process, doing a little bit of research, then designing something, then testing it out, and then going back to research, that's a really proven great way to develop products. So I did a little bit of analysis of what you did. I read your reports on what you did, how you tested your products. And here I want to just pick a little bit, some of the things that I thought that were really good, and maybe some of the things that are maybe dangerous or are maybe better to be avoided, or maybe some things that you also noticed that didn't work. So I'm gonna start with the good stuff. I know one of your products, you tested it by giving the product to people at home. So testing at home, this is called the user diaries method. It's a great way because you put your product in the context of people's lives. It's also pretty tricky to design it and then to gather data, but if done properly, it can give you really, really useful data. This is something we did. I used to work for Gorenje, which is a domestic appliances company in Slovenia. And we did these user diaries and they really proved very useful. So that's a really great way how you can improve your customer experience. It's also amazing that you all did evaluation of your testing. So sitting down and thinking about what worked, what didn't, really improves any further activities that you do in testing or in customer research. So it's not just about the testing itself, but it's also then sitting down, looking back and seeing what worked, what didn't work, what could we do next time better. The third thing that it was really also great is having diverse groups of people included in your testing and your research. You will also see this as one of the downsides. I'll talk about that later, but really trying to involve as many different potential customers or people in your product development is going to enrich the outcomes. The first thing I want to also emphasize is facilitation. So any kind of co-created processes, they need somebody who takes care of the process and takes care of the people in the process, and that is facilitation. And having those skills of how to plan and then also facilitate multiple people in the process is very useful in product development. And then the last one is the multi-method data collection. So not focusing only on one data type. So let's say only text or only images, but really trying to gather as much different data as possible. On the flip side, a lot of you also did focus groups. So focus groups in theory are okay. The challenges of focus groups are that you put people out of their context, usually into a closed room with specific tasks. And what happens is that people don't necessarily behave naturally. You really have to think about what are you looking for, what questions are you asking to get some relevant and reliable data. Another thing that happens with focus groups is groupthink. So people, we tend to adjust our opinions based on the people who are around us. So in focus group, if you have maybe some outliers, people who have very extreme opinions or preferences, they will tend to flat out with other people. The second thing is to diverse user groups per activity. This is also some of you in your evaluations and reflecting notice that. So when we have a really diverse group of people testing a product, it's going to be really likely that we will get very different, let's see, insights. And that's going to be very difficult then to use in a way of knowing so which of these behaviors or preferences are prevalent. Diverse groups are really good at the beginning of the process where you're trying to think about what are all the different ways people interact with your product. But as you go through the development, it makes sense to narrow down the people that you test with so you can get some patterns and some relevant insights. Another thing that you also mentioned was that 2 broad goals for one event. I've seen this working with startups and with scale-up companies. When they ask me to come and do some customer research, they want to ask all the questions in one research. And that usually is not a good idea. With research, we always have some limited time. And the more broad we go, the less valuable insights we will get. So my advice to you would be try to be as narrow as possible when you do some types of research activities. And then the fourth one, and I think this one is the biggest, is lack of real life testing. So that means that you test your product, let's say, in the natural environment of your customer, where you can really observe their behavior and how they interact with the product. Matej, are there any questions so far?
Yes, just right
Yes.
now, Nora asked, actually working with focus group was part of the A2.3 main methodology, so not invented by project partners. But this is not
Yeah.
really a question, more of a statement, but maybe you
Yeah,
have a
focus groups.
reply.
Yeah, it's a very, let's say, traditional way of research. Also, you have to understand that there's a difference between market research and user research. So market research is going to focus on different things than customer research, and focus groups are, let's say, traditional method of market research. If there are any more questions, don't interrupt me, Matej, okay?
Sure, continue.
Cool. So, okay, I do want to have a question for everybody now, and I would like to put in the chat. So, looking back at the testing that you did or any other activities related to customer experience, was there anything that you were positively or also maybe negatively surprised by? Let's wait a couple of minutes to see if there are any answers in the chat.
So we're looking for some things that surprised us during the process, right?
Yeah.
Or after looking at the results.
Yeah. Something that you maybe did not expect, maybe about your product or about people or about the process or activities themselves, maybe how it was to plan them and then to execute them, what kind of data you gathered. Were there any surprises?
So there are some. Especially for example, Dominika from Slovakia, she says positive attitude and interest to participate in testing. And then also Matej and the team wrote their willingness to cooperate was surprising. Usually they do not want to share sensitive information, but I guess they were feeling enough comfortable in this environment.
Nice.
Nora from Hungary, challenges in involving testers. Maybe we can later talk more about it, what these challenges were.
Yeah, Nora, if you could write, like, what were the challenges, feel free. Yeah, sure.
Then Olga from Poland, people were so eager to cooperate. They shared their opinions really easily. I expected that it would be quite difficult to get some information from them. Can you comment a little bit? Why do you think people like to play this game or give their...
I think that mostly people like to talk about themselves. This is something human beings like to do. So participating in these kind of things, especially, it really depends how you get involved with these types of product testing, but oftentimes it's going to be related to something that you like, right? So you will participate in testing out a product that is somehow relevant to you. And that actually really, yeah, it gets us exciting and we love talking about it. So maybe there's also some fear that, asking strangers to participate, maybe there might be some misconceptions, but usually people are really very eager to share their opinions and to help out, right? So I hope that these positive experiences are going to encourage you to involve more people throughout the product development in your process. Cool.
There are more. There are some more if we have time. Can I share more? So Rita from Hungary, she says it is a good insight that they got from the process that they can even replace the product with a service, like in the circular bioeconomy now.
Nice.
Then Piotr from Poland, the fact that local conditions such as water hardness can influence the effectiveness of the product.
Nice. Yeah. That's
Then
really nice.
Angela, I think, I'm not sure which country is it, large retailer was really interested in participating in the tests.
Nice. Yeah.
And
so
Piotr?
I think... Please go.
The last one is from Piotr. Both men and women expressed interest in participating in the testing process. Assembling a test group was not difficult. The participants were engaged and willingly shared their feedback.
Yeah. So this is one thing that I've seen a lot of software companies, but I'm sure with product companies it would be the same, is as you develop your product and you involve people, they're gonna start growing with you and they're gonna become a community. And as this community grows, you will always have people at your fingertips that you can involve and gather feedback from. So this really, thinking of it as this community of people that help you develop and are part of your development story can be a very great way, firstly, to get access to people which are willing to cooperate, but also these are going to be your biggest fans. They're going to be the ones, like ambassadors of your product, because they're going to feel a part of it, that they've contributed to the development of your product. I remember when Miro, I don't know if you know it, it's a software company that does like online whiteboarding. I was part of facilitation experts, and just being part of, somebody else's story made me even a bigger fan of the product. So yeah, awesome. Let's go on. I want to drop a little bit of theory for those who are maybe interested in the theoretical part of the development process. So this is a version of the double diamond, where you can see that each phase is basically built of two parts. So it's from generating ideas and then making choices. So usually in design in general, what we want to emphasize is that before we go into the solution space, we want to go into the problem space. What I've seen with startups and smaller, let's say, companies at the beginning of their life is that they have an idea of what they want to do. So they will start in a solution space. However, it's really, really important that even if you start with an idea, that you go back to the problem space. So really understanding which problems or what problem does your product solve? And really understanding who are those people who have that problem, why is that a problem for them, and then how can your product cater to their problem. Only then we go into the solution space where we design, test, and refine, and evaluate, and etc. The thing is that even though this process here looks linear, in practice, it's really messy. We go back and forth, we go in circles, in spirals. But what I want to show here with this spiral is that every time you go through the process, your product is slightly better. So it's this really incremental development, like a steady process that's going to help you develop your product. if I would really simplify, what are the two things that we do in customer experience design are research and prototype. These are like the most important things in the phase of product development. Today, I'm gonna dive in a little bit on the research part because I'm very biased. It's my favorite part of the process. First thing I'd like to emphasize is that when doing research, we have to be aware that we all have biases. What is that? These are, if you look it up, I think there are over 60 or 70 different biases that every human being has. And it's really important to be aware of that when you start designing a research process and do research activities in order to minimize or bypass those biases. So for example, a confirmation bias, which maybe some of you are maybe familiar with, is that if we believe something to be true, we will selectively only see the data that supports our belief, right? So if I believe black jeans are the most popular thing, all of a sudden I will start seeing black jeans everywhere. There are also other biases, but there are ways how we can minimize those biases. One of the things that I mentioned earlier was the multi-data gathering methods. So we call this triple triangulation, where we try to have multiple researchers involved, multiple types of data, and multiple methods. So in practice, that would look like that instead of just doing a questionnaire, maybe what you want to do is a questionnaire. Maybe you want to do some contextual interviews, and then maybe you want to do a little bit of autoethnography. So autoethnography means that you go yourself through the process of using a product or an experience. So that would be 3 different methods. Multiple types of data means that you would record things, you would have audio data, you would take pictures, you would take videos, you would have text. So you would try to convey as many different types of data as you can. And ideally, there's going to be at least 3 different people either doing these things or looking at the data that you got. What's a tricky thing, this is like from my personal experience, we did a research for our statistical agency, National Statistical Agency, and we were trying to improve their online website. And when we were interviewing people, we divided them into 2 groups. So people who are really familiar with statistics and numbers and data, and then people who are less familiar with it. And the problem, the mistake that we did is that one of us had only talked to one group and the other person only talked to the other group. And what we noticed throughout the process, that because of that, we had very different ideas of who the customer is, because we only spoke to one type of people. And this is something you really have to be aware of during the process, how your own biases will cloud your judgment and the decisions that you make. Another thing that we want to be mindful of is looking at what people say and think, but then what people do or what people believe and feel, it's much more relevant for how people are going to use your product than what people say and do. One of the most common mistakes I see in customer research is asking customers, would you use this product? And we as humans, we're really shitty at thinking about or knowing what we will do in the future. So it's much more relevant to ask people about their past experiences and learn from that, because that is much more reliable than what might happen in the future. Another thing is that also we can look at the customer research from the whole process. Different parts of the customer journey will give us different insights and different questions. So when you do customer research, really also think about which part of the customer journey do I want to learn about? Do I want to learn about how people find about my product, how they gather info about my product, how do they decide about my product, how do they purchase it, how are they using it, how do they stop using it? Based on the customer journey, you will also have very different types of methods and questions that you ask. The next thing that you already also did is really going out, talking, facing people, talking to them, being in interaction with them. And then it's just a lot of data that needs to be processed. This is an example from a company that they developed their own product. They're a tech company. And we did interviews for qualitative data, and then we did questionnaires for quantitative data. And then really just going through the data, I think that is the most difficult part of doing customer research, because you have to know how to make sense of it. And this is what is really nice, that customer experience design and design thinking have really cool tools that can help you make sense of the data that you have. So again, for the company that I talked earlier about, what we did with them was we were trying to see what types of customers they have. We used a tool called personas for that. They're needs-based profiles. And that really helped them understand how they can cater to different needs of different people. And I think this is also something you found through your research, is people have very different preferences. But the more research you will do, the more you will see that there are sort of some clusters of people that you can put into one box, and then really think about how can you cater to their needs. What we did here, for example, was that we thought about, like for here on the right side, you see different channels that people interact with their product. And we tried to see through research, like through awareness, which channels are used, from gathering info and then from purchasing. And you can see also what percentage of people use which. So then visualizing the data that you have, it's super important to make sense out of it. Going back to you, what was the most challenging thing that you found about customer research? And I'm gonna stop sharing right now, yeah, to see what are the questions. So if you think about customer research, so the testing that you did, what was the most challenging part for you?
So while waiting, I can ask you something. So what do you think went wrong if the questionnaire, if people, like when evaluating the product features, different features, no? The questionnaire afterwards shows that most of the things were rated 8 out of 10 points.
So this is the problem, using the numbers to quantify preferences is very difficult, because the number 8 doesn't tell you anything. And a number 8, let's say you and I, we fill out a questionnaire, right? And we have to scale something from 1 to 10. How you interpret what an 8 is for you is going to be probably different how I interpret what 8 is for me. So when we use questionnaires, this is usually for gathering quantitative data. So the questions you want to ask through a questionnaire is not how do you feel about this, or why is this important to you, but you want to ask questions like how many, or what. right? So you want to quantify. So what you would usually do is you would start with qualitative research to gather like what are the different habits or preferences or needs of people, and then you would use a questionnaire to see how many people agree or disagree either with some statements or if that's true for them or not. So using numbers to quantify how people like your product can be very tricky, and oftentimes it can be useless, right? Because an 8 is not what will it tell you? It will tell you it's okay, but then you will think, oh yes, my product is great, and then you'll go to the market and nobody will buy it, and you're gonna be surprised. But how? Everybody rated it 8, you know? So yeah, that would be. We have drawing meaningful conclusions from a relatively small sample. We worked with a group of around 20 participants, required careful reflection. A key consideration was whether such a limited group could still offer valuable and actionable insights in a way that is sufficiently representative. Ultimately, it became clear that even with the modest numbers, well-structured engagement and qualitative depth can lead to observations that meaningfully inform future decisions and directions. Yes, that is one thing that you have to be really careful about when you work in person with groups of people. So you're gathering qualitative data, you really, really have to think about who did you include in the research, right? So because, for instance, if the group is going to be very heterogenic, so it means that you're going to have very different people who have very different experiences or preferences with your product, what you will get is a breadth of all the possibilities, but they're not going to be statistically relevant because you will not know what the general population, right, thinks about any of those, right? So having a small diverse group is really nice at the beginning of the process when you're still exploring what are all the different interactions or preferences or habits or ways people interact. And then after that, what you want to do is you want to really narrow down to a specific subgroup. And if you have 20 people or very specific people, you know, that have some really common traits, then you can get reliable statistical data on what are some habits and preferences, etc. Right? So they say the rule of thumb is if you have a very narrow group of people, you will learn about 80% of the preferences, habits, and challenges out of 7 people. So after the 7th person, you will only have 20% left new to learn about, right? But this means that you really have to be thoughtful about who do you involve in your research. Did I answer your question also, Daria?
I wanted, yeah, I think so. Piotr is also agreeing with you. Yeah, I was thinking while you gave this explanation that maybe in the living lab, like we designed, and it was mentioned before, it was actually based on the focus groups. We actually combined more wider area, no? So we wanted to have creative workshops, brainstorming how to develop further this product, as well as product testing, and with the questionnaires actually seeing what people think and how they would evaluate it. So if I understood right, you would put this into more stages and test each stage separately, or have different processes and methods for the steps. Is it correct?
Yeah. You have to think about, so every time you do research, you have to be really clear about what am I trying to learn? What is my research question, right? Like what is it that I'm looking at? And the more focused you are, the easier it's going to be to choose the appropriate method. And then you have to also use that method appropriately. So one of the things that I also noticed, And I've seen, like, the easiest way to them to do is to write a questionnaire, right? It's ridiculously simple, right? You just write a bunch of questions and you send it out to people, and then you get some data. It's super quick. You can get a lot of data, right? A lot of people can fill out a questionnaire, but it is deceivingly simple. Because one of the things that I noticed, like in the questions in the evaluation of some of the companies, is that the questions that were formed were, for example, leading questions. So a leading question is, how awesome is my product, right? So you're already assuming a product, or how often, or maybe not how often, but you know, questions that already have an assumption in them. And these are very tricky questions, because the data that you're going to get from that question it's not reliable, right? It's also about, like, would you buy this product, or would you pay an X price for this product? That is not reliable data, right? What you would want to ask is, how many similar projects have you bought, and how much did you spend for them, right? If let's say we're looking at pricing, right? So that's going to be much more reliable. If you see, I would say, yes, I would gladly pay 20 euros, I don't know, for a new pair of sunglasses, but then ask me, how many have you bought for 20 euros? I'm going to say none, right? So that's going to be much more reliable in terms of understanding how people work. Cool, Piotr. Our partners also emphasize that even feedback from a small group is valuable to them, as small companies often lack the resources to conduct and provide market research. Yes, of course. But also you have to understand what you're asking, because when you co-create with people, when you give them tasks, you're learning about behavior, right? You're learning about people's preferences, that kind of stuff. When you're trying to understand how many of something happens, then you can do a bigger scale up. But any research is better than non-research. Like, even if you talk with your mom, it's better than not talking with your mom about your product, right? Any kind of data is better than just being in your head with your own data. So I know we have 10 minutes left, right? I still have some stuff on my presentation, but I would also like to open up if there are any more questions from the participants.
Mate, is it possible that people also ask questions? Can you give them this option?
Rita did some research on me. You have checked my homepage, it's really rich. May I have some questions regarding the co-working with the public administration? How did you manage to convince the public sector that they need your services? What are the main experiences and understandings regarding collaboration with the public sector? What is the added value of Servis 8 coordinates the common work in the public sector? Yes. So, hi Rita. Can I hear you? I think you're muted. I think you might want to unmute yourself.
Maybe she wrote a question, and
she did, yeah.
I was proposing that this option exists for people who can also speak up rather than write. So
yeah. So yeah, the thing is that we started the Servis Jams. The first one I attended was in 2011. So that's only almost 14 years ago, and I remember back then we understood that this sort of participatory and iterative and design approach to services, but also products, is really beneficial. And we thought, like, everybody's gonna love it, but nobody knew about it, right? So back then it was really difficult to work in this area because nobody understood what it was, they didn't see any needs, etc. However, what has happened, also a little bit because of COVID, is because we were for 2 years online, and because there's so many software products, UX, so user experience, which is today understood as the design of experiences online or with digital products, really boomed, right? Also, in parallel, the European Union is really pushing for, let's say, human human participation or human-centered design. So involving citizens, going things participatory. And this is something because the public sector has been now heavily focused on digitalizing their services. The UX part comes really in handy. So actually, they're coming to us, right? When they're designing new services or redesigning their websites or apps, they are now looking for people who can do UX. And then another thing is that the public sector is always multi-stakeholder, right? Very rarely you're going to have only a few people or organizations as part of a process. And participation in those processes can really improve the outcomes, right? So let's say policy making, right? The more people you involve in policy making, the more likely the policy itself is going to be implemented and effective, right? And I think the public sector is slowly starting to recognize the importance of people working together. And then people like us who work with participatory design and facilitation can really offer them the skills to take care of designing the process, but then also facilitating the process, because they don't necessarily have those skills, right? It's a special set of skills. This is not something that's encouraged in the public sector, right? They had to do different things 30 years ago, but now they also have to be agile and, you know, respond to the changes and etc. So now they're valuing these, let's say, skills. And it's super great to work with them. Like the people that I work with really want to change, and there's just so much impact that you can do in the public sector. So that's why we focused on that.
Thank you, Anna. It's really insightful for me. Really, thank you.
Cool. Thank you for asking.
If somebody else wants to ask directly, maybe just raise the hand that you have, and Matej can give you the rights to speak.
Maybe while we wait for people to write a question, maybe I would just want to share one more slide in terms of what can be useful for you. So how can you this? I wanted to say, like, how can you use customer experience or thinking from the customer perspective to improve your products? So one thing that you can use is to simplify very complex information. A lot of your products maybe have a complicated technology behind that you want to communicate, or some technical details. Maybe you want to talk about your process or how it's used. So you can really use customer experience design to simplify that complex information. Another thing you can also do is you can encourage sustainable behaviors. So how you design your product will influence how people use it, right? How you design the interfaces, what information you give, etc. You can really help people do more sustainable behaviors. Another thing is you can also build trust and transparency. This is one thing I also mentioned before, is the more you're going to involve your potential customers in your process, the more trust you will build and transparency, and that in turn is going to improve your, let's say, customer outreach. And then also another thing with customer experience design, and this comes from the design part, is visualizing. One thing like that's super powerful is showing people the impact that they might contribute to by using your products, or the impact that your products have either on their lives or on the economy or the world in general. So these are all the different things that you can use customer experience to boost your product development. Cool. Any other questions? All right. Then I would say thank you for all the questions that were there. Thank you for inviting me. I'm more than happy to ask any further questions. You can find me on LinkedIn. you can email me. I'd be happy to share something if I know about it. And I give the mic back to Matej or Daria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, for this insightful presentation of yours. I hope that everyone here learned something new and that we can somehow conclude this whole activity of A 2.3. And yeah, it was, for me, it was very interesting. So next time we're going to do some research. We're going to take into account everything you said, and we're getting to be better along the way while learning by doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you everyone for participating. It was very lovely also for me to do this whole process of living lab activity that we had. And I think it's very nice also to think about it a little bit afterwards, and maybe to have now connection if we want to spread more or do further activities on this site. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for coming, and that's it from our side for today.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.